Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Freed Maxick, now part of Witham, a national advisory and public accounting firm. The local team continues its decades-long commitment to serving Western New York with advisory, tax, and assurance services. More at witham.com. And the Prospect Fund announcing the film The Voice of Hind Rajab, based on the true story of a 6-year-old Palestinian girl and efforts to rescue her in war-torn Gaza. Screening at the Little Theater, February 6th through 12th. Details and tickets at thelittle.org.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made nearly 3 years ago in California. On March 10th, 2023, a remarkable piece of music made its debut on the West Coast. The piece, called A Knee on the Neck, is an oratorio in tribute to George Floyd. It was performed by the Stanford Symphony Orchestra and Stanford Symphonic Chorus and composed by award-winning composer and Rochester native Adolphus Hailstork. Dr. Hailstork has been outspoken about the role of music in turbulent times, especially when it comes to injustices against African Americans. He once said, quote, "I can speak on the issues and put them in my work. These are the tragedies and triumphs of a people who've been beaten up for 400 years. Does anyone speak for them? Who writes pieces that speak for the existence of African Americans in the United States? I'll take on that job," end quote. Dr. Hailstork will be back in his hometown this weekend for a choral concert in his honor. But first, he's joining us to talk about the role of his work and about art and social change, politics, and if music is effective in generating that change. I'd like to welcome our guests. On the line with us is Dr. Adolphus Hailstork, award-winning composer. Welcome to the program, sir. Good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And with me in studio is Lee Wright, who is the Director of Music Ministry at Downtown United Presbyterian Church, founding Artistic Director of First Inversion Choral Ensemble, Director of the Treble Choir at Nazareth University, Director of 2 mixed choirs at the University of Rochester. I think we got it all, Lee.
Yeah.
Busy man.
Yes.
And I know, Lee, you're looking forward to this weekend. This is a big deal for Rochester to have Dr. Hailstork back, isn't it?
We are so excited. You know, I've known Dr. Hailstork's name for a long time. First, I think I first played an organ work of his back during my undergraduate time, and actually won a National Association of Negro Musicians organ competition with that work, and but only recently became more aware of his vast choral work and have begun programming it in all my various venues, and then later found out that he was born here in Rochester and thought, oh wow, this is so wonderful.
So the event is on Saturday, the Hailstork Choral Festival celebrating Rochester's own Adolphus Hailstork, Saturday at 3:30 p.m. at United Presbyterian Church on Fitzhugh Street. He's going to work directly with local choirs, and community members are welcome to attend Dr. Hailstork's collaborative work in rehearsal with the choirs from 12:30 to 2:30 as well. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, we actually just changed the schedule back 1/2 hour. So
Okay.
12 to 2, and the concert's at 3 instead of 3:30.
Oh, very good. Thank you for the correction there.
Just recently made that change.
All right, so 3 o'clock concert on Saturday at United Presbyterian Church on Fitzhugh Street. Dr. Hailstork, you know, I mean, you're a man of many accomplishments. Does this have any special meaning for you in Rochester, this event this weekend?
Well, it's a first. I was only up there for a musical presentation one time before with, what's the name of the group? The Gateways thing,
Yep.
conducted by Michael Morgan. And this is a first trip back for anything other than that. I'm glad to be back.
And you know, Lee was talking about programming more of your work. I wonder, have you noticed an increase in interest in the performance of your work in recent years?
Well, as I've aged, I jokingly think people are saying, "Well, look, he might not be around much longer. We better grab him while he's still here." So I'm very thankful. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, and I think we got a couple of clips from the.
I don't know what that is about.
We've got a couple of clips from the oratorio that we can listen to in a moment here. But before we do that, Dr. Hailstork, I want to ask you, in the course of your career, if you view the work that you've created as having, you know, sort of changed. Has it become more political, more driven on sort of social commentary, or has it always sort of been imbued in what you've been doing?
Well, yeah. I remember when I was working on my doctorate at Michigan State that I wrote a piece called "Lament for the Children of Biafra." And I mean, I was that concerned about a terrible thing that was happening at that time at that place. And so in a way, I've always been interested, especially if it involves the abuse of children.
And we're at this time, too, when there's a little bit of more, I think, household level consciousness of some protest work going on, simply because of what we've seen in Minneapolis with ICE recently. Bruce Springsteen, put a piece out pretty quickly called "Streets of Minneapolis." A couple of other artists I've seen reworking the Neil Young's, 4 dead in Ohio became 2 dead in Minnesota. So there's a level of commentary going on, and I want to go back to the George Floyd murder and just ask you, before we listen to a couple of clips, what you hoped to accomplish as an artist, as a creator. That, what could music, what could art say about that might impact the social consciousness after George Floyd?
Well, I'm hoping that people will react with a concept of wanting to do better. I think, especially in this time that we are living now, we are a better nation, I believe. At least I grew up thinking that. Than some activities or events say we are, and I'm hoping I can make a contribution to that thought.
I want to explore that point that you just made, because I can't help but feel a little despair when you say that we are a better nation than George Floyd. We are a better nation than, point to anything. But you kind of added that caveat. You said, at least I grew up thinking that. Are you starting to waver? Are you starting to waver in that idea?
I am hoping that I stay long enough to see a rebound from the current events. The things that happened in Minneapolis have really made me unhappy, and I put some of that unhappiness in a piece I'm working on right now, and that I believe we can do better. I like to think we're a better nation. I mean, after all, when I grew up, we were celebrating the triumph of World War II. That's how far back I go, and that our guys and gals went over to Europe and straightened that mess out. And now we seem to be having our own kind of a mess, unprecedented, in my opinion, very similar to what they had there. So I'm hoping that things will get better.
Let's listen to some of Dr. Hailstork's work. And this is from A Knee on the Neck. And we'll listen to the first selection, and then we'll talk about it.
For if you're arrested, politeness may restrain them. The police just might restrain them. That may protect you.
That may protect you until I can get there. Till I can get there. Till I can get there.
All right, so you're hearing some of the work here, and I want to credit the people who deserve to be credited. Of course, Adolphus Hailstork, composer, That's the Stanford Symphony Orchestra and Stanford Symphonic Chorus. Paul Phillips, conductor there. Stephen M. Sano, who's the chorus director. Samantha Williams, the mezzo-soprano. Alexander Tate, tenor. Wilfred Kelly, the baritone there. And, boy, Dr. Hailstork, can you describe a little bit more about this first selection that we just listened to?
Well, Herb Martin wrote a wonderful libretto that he sent to me, and I asked him, did he want me to set this? And he said, yes, would I please? It was within a week of the George Floyd murder. And a lot of people were upset by that, and I was too. And obviously, Herb Martin was. He's a great poet from Dayton, Ohio. And so I started setting it, and he said that it was a reminiscence, in a way, of his mother telling him to be very careful going out in public and to be that anything bad can happen, and to prepare himself mentally to deal with it. And that's what they're saying right at that point in the piece I wrote.
What do you hear there, Lee?
Gosh, so at the very end, I heard a bit of the feeling of the spiritual, and I know that Dr. Hailstork has woven the spiritual in much of his work, including this oratorio, and I also heard it juxtaposed with, the very highest level of composition for symphony orchestra and soloists that we have received kind of from European traditions. And so I just hear a beautiful blending and calling upon traditions coming together with hope.
In our second half hour, I'm going to talk more with Lee about art as this vehicle for commentary and perhaps change, especially at a time like this. Let's listen to a second selection, if we could, from Knee on the Neck. And I want to read a little bit of some of what you're going to hear lyrically. Have you ever seen a knee on a neck? Child that stops all breathing. Home, home. There's a virus going round taking names. It has taken my neighbor's name and has left my heart in pain. Let's listen.
Has you ever seen a knee on a neck?
Has you ever seen a knee on a neck?
Is a virus going round taking names? Taking names. It has taken my neighbor's name and has left my heart in
That's from Knee on the Neck. And a knee on the neck is a subject. It's a phrase, the name of a piece that instantly, I have to think, Dr. Hailstork, carries some risk for the creator of being banned. I don't know if this is going to get on the Kennedy Center stage. I don't know if anything's going to be on the Kennedy Center stage. But
Never.
but being perhaps prejudged or stereotyped or being targeted by a government that is actively going after its perceived enemies. I mean, I wonder if there's been any blowback for you for creating this kind of art.
No, I have never had any problem with that at all. I think most of my career has been under the radar. So I've had no trouble. No.
I heard you scoff a little. I mentioned the Kennedy Center, which the president announced yesterday is going to be closed for 2 years for renovations now. that comes coincidentally or not after, sort of some half-sold shows that were carefully selected by the Trump administration for performance there, and a number of artists deciding not to be on stage there. Would you allow a performance on the Kennedy Center stage at this point?
No. Because first of all, you're not saying the correct name.
It's the Trump Kennedy Center.
Yes.
He put his name in front of it.
Yeah, and with that's a crime as far as I'm concerned. And I wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. Lee, do you agree with that position on it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope that changes.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what the next couple of years. Last year has felt like a decade. I mean, so who knows what the next couple of years will be like. But so Dr. Hailstork, in our remaining time there, let's talk just a little bit more about Knee on the Neck. Clearly, if we know the story of George Floyd, we can understand some of the pain and the emotion there. Are you a believer that art can be a vehicle for change, Dr. Hailstork?
Yes, I am. I absolutely do believe that.
And in this case,
you have to remember what music originally stood for. Music, it was a ceremonial thing. That music has always served as a ceremony for the expression of community desires and beliefs, and that's what music is to me. I mean, I came up in the Episcopal Cathedral in Albany, New York, and whenever when we were singing for a ceremony of reasons, and expressed a certain part of the religious season. So. Music is a powerful element. Absolutely.
You told WRT Music 2 years ago that in order to include more diverse voices on stages, in concert halls, here's what you said. You said, conductors and administrators have to care about opening their doors and lifting their ceilings because they can have their entire careers playing dead Europeans otherwise.
That's true.
Tell me more about that.
Well, let's face it. A conductor and a board choose the repertoire that their orchestras or their opera companies are going to do. And there's such a vast amount of literature, they certainly do not have to look to American composers if they don't want to, and they certainly don't, which is a fringe group, and they don't have to look at African-American composers in particular because it's a fringe of a fringe. So things have gotten trifling better, but it's a fact of reality. I mean, if you look at, if you just look at the vast quantity of music produced by Mozart and Bach and Beethoven, all those guys, all fabulous stuff, then you have to go overboard in terms of your research to find pieces of music by Americans that you might want to program.
You also said that you used to have the attitude of, you said, don't tell anybody my race before playing a piece. Has that changed?
Mm-hmm. I'm indifferent to it. I've gotten good reception from audiences and performers, despite knowing the expression of or the knowledge of who I was racially. The music is itself by a person, and I don't get into it's got to represent black culture or blackness or whatever that is. I just write, and I think people are appreciating that is my goal in life.
So let me ask a clumsy follow-up question then, Dr. Hailstork. I can understand the disposition that says maybe don't tell people my race before playing this piece or for programming the work, because here's where it gets clumsy. But I'm watching an NFL offseason in which there's 10 teams that fired their head coaches, and they are not allowed to hire a new coach unless they interview 2 candidates of color. And you had Cleveland, where I grew up, had to wait days to make an announcement because they had to get a second black candidate in the door to just say, okay, we did it. We interviewed two black guys, and now we can hire who we want. No candidates of color have been hired in this sequence, but it becomes sort of ridiculous. And it's almost, to me, as a fan of the sport, insulting to the black men who are taking these interviews, who clearly the teams have no intentions. And what I don't want to see is a world in which where we've got this company, this stage, this theater saying, all right, we programmed one black composer, we did our duty, as opposed to we want quality, and we know there's quality coming from everywhere. And we don't, but we're not going to tokenize it. We're going to choose, and we're going to be, intentional. How do you feel about getting the right balance that isn't just saying, all right, we checked a box, now we can move on?
That's an interesting question. It's a different thing. That's the art world is very different from the music world. Remember, the art world has established masterworks, and as I said before, you could easily spend your whole career. I mean, we know many artists who spend the whole career playing European composers, and they have a right to do that. My hope is that they'll open their minds a little bit more and seek works that were not written by Europeans and would include Americans. I mean, after all, that was the one of the motivating principles behind much of Aaron Copland's work. They started out saying they wanted to create an American aesthetic and an American sound, and Aaron did that. Created something that Americans, especially here, as an American sound. That's okay. So it's the question of opening the doors. That's all. And I don't know if that goes quite the same for sports. That's a big business, and it's not an established masterwork situation.
No, I think that's certainly fair. Well, listen, our time is short with Dr. Hailstork, and I got to say, our colleagues down in classical are so excited to hear this conversation. You've listed Rochester native David Diamond as a teacher, and our friends in WXXI Classical remember him. They remember him well. Right. He was a super brainy and stubborn guy who could sometimes rub people the wrong way, they said. What did you learn from him?
Oh, I learned exactly what you just mentioned, that if he saw me bowing too much to my theory training, which I had a strong grounding in theory, he would say, "Who says?" He would have me question the concept of, because I've been taught this way, I must do such and such. And he would always say, "Who says?" And that was a very pivotal experience in working with him.
Well, WXXI Classical Morning host Brenda Tremblay says, "You have the coolest name in the classical library, Adolphus Cunningham Hailstork III." And she wonders, she wonders about your family history. Is there any more you can tell us about yourself before we have to let you go?
Well, it's the name that intrigues people. The name has intrigued me too. I have. It goes way back. Well, my grandfather and my father all had the same name. I'm the third. And where that came from remains to be seen. I'm not sure, actually. But I've been told that it's a German name, that the original version of it was Hagel Stark or something like that, which the Stark is power. Hagel, I don't know, that means hello, maybe. And that's how it came to be. And it's kind of weird, and I've got a weird mixed up background. And I hope someday, long after I'm gone, I'm sure that somebody will do some musicological research and come to the conclusion, oh, okay, this is where he came from. I have no idea. It's a mixture. It's a part American Indian, part German, and of course African. And there you go.
What a story.
Mongrel.
Well, Dr. Hailstork, I want to thank you for being generous with your time. I know Rochester is looking forward to seeing you back in your native Rochester on Saturday. Good luck to you, sir. Thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you very much.
That is really the great Dr. Adolphus Hailstork, an award-winning composer, and want to tell you that the event is coming up on Saturday. It's at 3 o'clock at United Presbyterian Church on Fitzhugh Street, and community members are welcome to attend Dr. Hailstork's collaborative work in rehearsal with the choirs, 12 to 2. So 12 to 2, and then 3 o'clock for the performance at United Presbyterian Church. We're going to take a short break, come back with Lee Wright, talk about some of what we just heard, and talk about some of these broader themes of the power of music and art, especially at this American moment.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Mary Cariola Center, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, believing an informed and engaged community is a connected one. marycariola.org. And Excellus Blue Cross Blue Shield, working with members to find health coverage for every stage of life, helping to make care and coverage more accessible in more ways for more people across the Rochester community. Details online at excellusbcbs.com.
The Olympics begin with protests against U.S. immigration agents providing security. What's that say about America's image abroad? On the next Morning Edition from NPR News.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. There are days where, I feel not very qualified to sit in this chair, and this is one of those hours, I will tell you. Our colleagues at Classical down the hall would be better suited than me. They do such great work, but they also know that how much I not only appreciate great art, great music, but a great Rochester story, and you just heard it in Adolphus Hailstork. And, Lee Wright was talking during our brief break about this is your first chance to meet him in person this Saturday, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Big deal there. So, I mean, I think, he joked about his advancing age, but what a conversation and what a thinker to me. What stood out to you in that conversation?
Well, he's just such a thoughtful artist, and just easy to speak with. And so often I think we, as musicians even, it's easy to put a wall up between ourselves and composers who are all have a certain sort of greatness that's different from, us who are simply practicing, interpreting, I suppose.
I didn't sense any sort of walls or distance with him at all, which was really, really lovely. What do you want the community to know about the event on Saturday?
It's a chance to hear several different choirs from the area, particularly academic choirs, which don't often come together. Last summer I was thinking about what are some things I can do as director of music ministry at Downtown Presbyterian Church to invite more of the community through our doors and have events that bring people together, because really I think of myself as being in the community building business. And as a church musician, as an educator, both with groups and individuals, I always hope that music can bring us closer together and bring people together that may not otherwise be in the same room. And I have found that certainly with even just working with my choir, First Inversion, that draws people from all over the community, from different walks of life, but all with a common love of music and wanting to sing together. So this particular event with the chorale from the Eastman School of Music, where I've spent many years working on degrees, the chamber singers from Nazareth University, where I have just started working and building relationships, the select choir from East Rochester High School and their wonderful director, Tim Lambert, who I've known for many years, actually first met through the church, and now have had a more professional relationship. I'm just so excited to see all these groups coming together, and getting to hear from a composer directly is always so exciting. Especially, I think, for an ensemble that's been working on a piece for a while, and to be able, your conductor might say lots of things about how to do it and their desires for it to coming together, but there's nothing like hearing from a composer directly.
So the Hailstork Choral Festival, celebrating Rochester's own Adolphus Hailstork, again Saturday at 3 at Downtown United Presbyterian Church. They would love to see you there. You heard Dr. Hailstork say that he's working on a piece regarding what he has seen in Minneapolis with ICE, that has been on his mind too. Obviously, he has already addressed the murder of George Floyd in his work. And Lee, you've said that the discomfort surrounding art with a purpose, and art that might have a difficult story to tell, has been on your mind. Tell us more about that.
It certainly has. And, as I've come up through my education and decided to become a scholar of the American Negro spiritual specifically, very early on I thought, I noticed that concert spirituals were a thing, and noticed that they would often be performed at the ends of concerts, perhaps, maybe one spiritual in a concert. Often there's high energy. Sometimes they're arranged in a gospel style. But I began to think that, they're almost kind of just being tokenized in concerts individually. And so I began to curate full programs featuring the spiritual. And the last time I sat here with you, we were talking about a time when I had programmed a full program of spirituals on the Rochester Fringe Festival, and the choir singing is mostly made up of white Americans, and with a few African Americans joining, and people didn't know what to think about that. Some people were really outraged.
To see all the white singers?
Yeah, I think to see white singers singing this music when for so long in the music business, the intellectual property of African Americans has been stolen, exploited by white America. And so I understand why people would look at this and think the same thing. And this music is really being arranged in choral settings for choirs, all choirs to sing, and some of it particularly for really choirs trained in more European traditions, which there aren't necessarily as many all-black church choirs that are, seeking out these sorts of arrangements of spirituals. So it's really something that actually, in some ways, you could say has been created for choirs coming from European traditions to sing. And is that uncomfortable? Does it provoke questions and thought? Absolutely.
I thought you handled the previous incident, the episode, with a lot of grace. And I know that it can be tough because I also understand the emotions that people feel. My observation, again, I'm going to stay with the clumsy theme here, but let's just put stuff out there. If a spiritual is being performed, or if the work of a black composer is on a stage, if an oratorio about George Floyd is being performed, and it's being performed by a largely white set of artists who have sort of cynical ideas about taking something that might be of the moment in the zeitgeist and profiting off it, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. If it's another to say, we've got dedicated community members who care about learning and experiencing and hearing, and one way to bring them into understanding a little bit more about the voice of an expression of pain, of loss, is to sing with us, to be on that stage, to try to understand how the words might hit differently in different places. Well, then I think it's kind of different. I don't see that as taking away. I see that as an attempt to try to bridge misunderstanding or lack of understanding across culture. Is that naive?
I've often thought of myself as naive and idealistic, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Life is too short to be cynical, I think, and it was the idea of people profiting. First of all, there really isn't profit in classical choral singing, especially with, large community choirs. There are a few, there's a handful of professional singers that sing with First Inversion, and they receive a very small stipend, kind of a token of, appreciation for helping the community bring this work to life. But perhaps, really across the board, in contrast to the professional symphony orchestra, which is a very, a professional all-paid thing, still there's not nearly the money in that there is in other types of more popular forms of music where there is really lots of money involved. In classical music, people are mostly getting by, making a living, and when it comes to choral singing is mostly volunteer in this country, or around the world, really. And so to think that by singing this music, all these singers are somehow profiting, hopefully they are profiting simply through the education, through the experience of embodying these words that, yes, perhaps aren't theirs. And the words are never ours directly when we're singing, words that someone else wrote down.
Sure.
But it's our job to put ourselves in those shoes and to feel those words. And I think that's perhaps the most important element here. It's taking this music and taking these words, and everyone is going to have different feelings about them and about singing them and about the experience. And it's about having that experience, sharing it together, and then talking about it. That I think that's where the power for change lies.
Yeah, in listening to Dr. Hailstork say that we've got a choice and we could play Dead Europeans forever. And by the way, he said, their work is great. I mean, like, nobody's looking at like Beethoven and Bach and Schumann and many others and going like, actually, in retrospect, I actually don't think it was any good. I don't think that's what people are saying.
Right.
I think what he's saying is the body of work is so big and the focus for so long has been on it that you could miss things if you're not careful. So
Absolutely.
Appreciate and celebrate the works of the greats, but maybe don't just live in that narrow world. And I wonder if you agree with that. If you think that there's I don't think people who mostly are playing the Dead Europeans, as Dr. Hailstork says, have bad intentions. But I wonder what you think about his point there.
Absolutely. I look at my own knowledge, my own programming over the years, and we do what we're exposed to. And with a finite amount of time as we go about our daily lives, it is easy to simply do what we know, focus on the things we've already learned. And I have noticed, even as a Black American, I have simply become more aware of more music by Black composers recently than in my early education or as I was going through my degree work. Because, someone like Adolphus Hailstork was not talked about as much when I was doing my undergraduate degree as he is now. And I am happy to see that change in consciousness, awareness, and I think it comes from a great place. And I think it's important for us to give ourselves grace for the past and also just continually think about how can we do better in the future? What can we be aware of that's going to help all of us?
Yeah, I mean, if you're just coming into some black composer, I mean, like I understand the challenge of being heard. I also wonder if there is. I mean, I think about what then Senator Barack Obama was talking about stereotypes that tell you this is an activity for your culture, this is an activity for my culture, never the two shall meet, and you know how that kept, in his words, a lot of black kids out of certain activities and themes and art. Is there still a perception in parts of the black community, perhaps, that classical music is a white person's pursuit?
I think most definitely.
Still so, yeah.
And as much as, and there are certainly more black students of music now. If I go to the Eastman School of Music now, there are more black students than certainly when I was an undergrad. I was one of maybe 3 or 4 that I remember at that specific time. And I am very aware that my entrance into classical music had a lot to do with, influence from my white grandparents, because I'm mixed race. And a lot of the black classical musicians I know, we are the, to use Hale Stork's word, fringe. But, pursuing classical music is not mainstream in black communities. And there are some black people that fall in love with it and study it and have the access from an early age to this music and to learning about this music. But I do find that it is still a relatively inaccessible art form for a lot of people.
So before I get to some questions from my colleague Brenda Tremblay, who of course I'll steal Brenda's work all the time. I mean, I've got such good colleagues; they're so smart. I just want to ask you one other thing about the debate going on the national stage about the Trump Kennedy Center. I keep calling it the Kennedy Center, and Dr. Hale Stork said you got to call it by its whole name and understand why people are not doing it. There's an argument that says if you don't show up on a stage, then you're not going to convince anybody in that audience that they might have been wrong about something or that they might have been closed-minded about something, and that you're going to let them stay in their own sort of carefully curated bubbles. And as hard as it can be, sometimes the valuable thing to do is to be on that stage in front of the audience who is suspicious of you. Easy for me to say, as someone who's not at risk of anything. I mean, like I want to acknowledge, not in any sort of, academic or silly way, but in a real way, that some people might not feel all that safe in certain places performing. I get it, I do. But what do you make of the argument that, when you can get on that stage, that audience needs to hear you. That audience needs to hear your work, your voice, the ideas. And now they've got more Kid Rock. What do you think?
Yeah, it's that is a difficult question, and I think with the Trump Kennedy Center right now, that stage is a particularly fraught. It's loaded, and I don't
really
know.
Hot. It is.
And I don't even know what the audience. Yeah, who is the current audience? I feel there. I'm not.
That's
even
a fair point. I mean, I guess it
sure.
depends on the night. Yeah.
I think audience and artists are saying, no, we don't want to have anything to do with this kind of hate and divisiveness.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point too.
And but it did cause me to think of, I've taken First Inversion into the Southern Tier a couple times for performances of Holding On Through Song, our program of spirituals, for audiences that aren't our Safe Rochester hometown audience, people who may come to those concerts. I mean, I like to think if they came to begin with, then there's probably some sort of friendliness. Some, it's the
Like a self-selecting audience in a certain way.
right. And because we don't often have the opportunity, and I'm not sure if it makes sense or not, but people choose to come to something usually based on what's being performed, and and so it's rare that we perform for an audience that we know truly doesn't agree with us, or
That's a fair
that
point.
Sort of thing. But there's a spectrum, right? And we always hope that someone might come in and expecting something general, but learn something specific that touches them in an unexpected way.
So this is from my colleague Brenda Tremblay, who says that last year, First Inversion sang Hale Stork's arrangement of the spiritual "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child," that with soloists Robert Sims and Kirsten Piper Brown, and that song has been covered a million times, and it's usually a very slow lament. But this arrangement, Brenda says, is driving, upbeat, almost jazzy. What is it about spiritual, she says, that really inspires performers and audiences?
Something I've noticed, and a reason I've programmed specifically some of Hale Stork's spiritual arrangements, but also some others recently. We actually did this year's, just performed this year's performance of Holding On Through Song last weekend, and featured some new arrangements by Marcus L.A. Garrett and Sean Okpepolo, and some new arrangers that are really taking their arrangements in different directions. And I think partly in reaction to the times that we're living in, and because there was a time when a lot of the spirituals just had by folks like Harry Thacker Burley and early arrangers of the spirituals, they had a similar flavor. They were comfortable in a certain style of writing. And then even later, the spiritual arrangements of Moses Hogan, that some of which are very flashy, a lot of them weren't directly, at least in a musical sense, dealing with the friction, dealing with the underlying issues that the music is presenting. And it's one thing to present the music in a relatively subtle way and leave it to the audience to say, now, okay, this is an American Negro spiritual, these are the words, this is how, this is where this came from. It was easy to miss that in the past if you just listened to the music and didn't think about it too deeply. I think now, with Hale Stork's particularly Motherless Child arrangement that is so gripping, it is so emotional, you can't help but, I think, go to deep into the feeling of the music, and to understanding the struggle when you hear it. And I think composers today are bringing that out in different ways, and in many beautiful ways that I think are very thought-provoking and compelling.
Well, as we get ready to wrap here, let's remind our audience. Oh, man, I've got so many pages of questions, but the event is coming up on Saturday. Here it is. The Hale Stork Choral Festival is happening on Saturday, celebrating Rochester's own Adolphus Hale Stork, who you heard in our first half hour on this program today. It's happening Saturday at 3 o'clock at Downtown United Presbyterian Church on Fitzhugh Street, and community members are welcome to attend Dr. Hale Stork's collaborative work in rehearsal with the choirs from 12 to 2. You'd love to see people there?
We'd love to see people there. It's a free event. As I said, I'm in the business of community building, and I hope to meet people that I haven't met before, coming in and experiencing the music, experiencing this great composer in our midst, enjoying the contributions of the choirs from students, really from around the world who are studying here in Rochester. And admission is just a suggested donation. We hope that you'll be moved and want to support the continuing programming, but access is open to all. And really, my goal is just to see people there learning something and appreciating the work.
Last 30 seconds, this is your chance to meet Dr. Hailstork in person for the first time. Certainly most of the people coming out will not have had that opportunity. And this is a Rochesterian that I think we're going to be celebrating more, hopefully, and becoming more aware of. What are people going to find out about Adolphus Hailstork?
I think they'll find out that he's just a wonderful, warm human being, very approachable, as we heard, and I hope that it helps to break down that wall that often gets put up between, the composers of art music that can seem so distant and formal. No, they're people, and to connect with the person and connect with their music is to build community and make this place a better world to live in.
Thank you, Lee Wright, Director of Music Ministry at Downtown United Presbyterian Church, Founding Artistic Director of First Inversion Choral Ensemble, and Director of the Treble Choir at NASU, Director of Mixed Choirs at University of Rochester. Great having you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evan.
And we're hearing some of Hailstork's own work on Knee on the Neck. We'll close with that, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.